Hello, how you doing and welcome back to the channel. So it is here, Ireland against England in the Six Nations, the Grand Slam decider. Ireland going for the Grand Slam at home, St. Patrick's Day weekend. The teams are out. Was Steve Borthwick going to stick or twist? How affected were Ireland going to be from their injuries? Well, the teams are out and that's what I'm going to be looking ahead to and previewing in this video. Going through the match day 23s for both teams, but also talking about the game more generally because I think Ireland will romp home to a famous and very well-deserved Grand Slam victory. If you are new here, do subscribe to the channel and like the video. Also drop a comment down below. What do you make of the team selection from Andy Farrell and from Steve Borthwick? And how do you see this game going in Dublin this weekend? All right, let's get into it. So I'm going to start off with Ireland. I'll then move on to England. England, interestingly, actually named their team later than they have done at other times during this championship. They left it up until 48 hours out from the game taking place, which is the latest they can leave it. And from what I understand, it's because at the World Cup in France later this year, you have to announce your team in the host city, basically. You have to do your team announcement in the host city where the game is taking place. So in preparation for the World Cup, the RFU in England have explained that's why they've done that. For those of you interested in that particular kind of little bit of nuance, you might have been wondering why the team selection was quite a bit later. But anyway, I'll start with Ireland. I'll get on to England. As for Ireland, they really are probably a little bit relieved on the fitness of a few of their players. Caelan, Dorris and Dan Sheehan are both fit. They start. That's a big boost for the hosts. Obviously, they had a number of injuries in that game against Scotland. There was uncertainty with Ronan Kelleher and Dan Sheehan going off of who would be able to start at hooker. It is Dan Sheehan, and Caelan Dorris, of course, has arguably been the player of the championship so far. I mean, that's certainly a discussion that we'll be having once everything is said and done this weekend, but I think he is right in the mix. The Irish number 8 has been absolutely superb. Elsewhere, Ryan Baird comes into the second row. Ian Henderson injured, so the second row options for Ireland, I guess, being tested this Six Nations. We've seen Ty Byrne get injured, Ian Henderson now, but Ryan Baird comes in as well. It's just his third test start, so probably the biggest test start of his international career, I would suggest. But I'd imagine with the experience and the quality that he has around him in that Irish team, I wouldn't have thought there's too much cause for concern there. And then Robbie Henshaw comes in for Gary Ringrose. Ringrose, of course, another player that was injured against Scotland. But when you can call up Henshaw, and some of the videos I've done earlier this week just about the quality and strength and depth of this Irish team, Ringrose goes off. You've got a British and Irish line, Robbie Henshaw, who has been out injured, been making his way back from injury. He comes in to take his place. Jamison Gibson-Park as well, another guy who had been nursing injury. It had been Conor Murray at 9. Jamison Gibson-Park comes in at 9 to start for Ireland, and Murray is on the bench. Just a few other bits in terms of the players that are on the bench. Rob Herring is there. Ronan Kelleher hasn't been past fit. Kieran Treadwell as well returns to the bench because of that Henderson injury and Ryan Baird coming in. So I think he was kind of an ever-present off the bench in that tour of New Zealand, Treadwell, but he comes back into the start or the matchday squad. And then Jimmy O'Brien is on the bench as well, really versatile back with Henshaw being promoted from the bench to start. It's Jimmy O'Brien that comes in. So I won't go through the full Irish team in the way that I will for the English, but I've put it up on screen there for you. And I just think overall it's a team packed full of quality all across the pitch. You look at the players that are getting injured and the players they're able to call up. As I've said already this week, in fact, I've been consistent throughout the championship. I think Ireland will win this Grand Slam easily. I think they will go down as one of the best sides to do a Grand Slam as well. I know England are going to be smarting from that embarrassing defeat against France, but I just think you look at that Irish team and it's packed full of quality. Their defence is brilliant, their attack's brilliant, they're really well coached, they're at home. I think the crowd are going to be so up for it. I think it will be an unstoppable wave of just Irish rugby that will get the better of England ultimately. And also when you look at someone like Gibson-Park coming in at 9, playing with Sexton, those were the guys who have been the cornerstone of the halfback partnership really during Andy Farrell's time, certainly during the time where they've been more successful in recent years. So yeah, I think it's a strong Irish team. It's probably about what we expected, relieved from an Irish perspective to see Caelan Dorris and Dan Sheehan fit, but I think very good Ireland team and plenty for England to worry about. Let's get on to England, because one of the big question marks this week was what would Steve Borthwick do after his side were humiliated at home? Does he ring the changes or does he kind of have a bit of continuity? And I think there's probably somewhere in between, really. I think it's probably slightly closer to continuity than I would have gone for. It's 4 changes from the France game. 2 of those are forced through injury anyway, with Lawrence and Chesham being ruled out injured. So Dave Ribbans comes into the second row in place of Chesham, and Manu Tuilagi, unsurprisingly, replaces Ollie Lawrence in the centres. Henry Arundell is then set for his first start for England on the wing. He replaces Max Malins, and Owen Farrell comes in for Marcus Smith. Marcus Smith has dropped to the England bench. So I will run through the England 23 in full. You've got Ellis Genge, Jamie George and Kyle Sinclair, Maura Itoje and Dave Ribbans, Lewis Ludlam, Jack Willis and Alex Dombrandt. Jack Van Portfleet stays at 9 with Farrell at 10, Tuilagi and Slade the centres, and then Arundell, Anthony Watson and Freddie Stewart the back 3. On the bench, it's Jack Walker, Mako Vunipola and Dan Cole. Dan Cole, if he does come on, is set for his 100th appearance for England. Nick Asikwe returns to the bench, and then there's Ben Curry, Alex Mitchell, Marcus Smith and Joe Marchant returns to the England bench as well. So what do you make of the England team from Steve Borthwick? I think he is ultimately saying to a number of those players who didn't perform against France, go out there and prove me wrong. Alex Dombrandt, I really thought we could be seeing him dropped. I think a lot of people thought it might be a line in the sand, a seminal moment, that whether his international career was kind of faltering. But he gets given another chance at number 8 after being comprehensively outplayed. In fact, that back row of Ludlam, Willis and Dombrandt, they've got a lot to prove this weekend. They were completely outplayed by Krol, Aldrit, and Olivon in the French back row, coming up against an excellent Irish pack as well. They have their work cut out. They need a much better showing, particularly at the breakdown, to kind of make amends really for that game against France and to give England any sort of foothold in the game. If England have any hope of making this a contest, those guys have to perform an awful lot better. I'm not surprised that the front row is unchanged, based purely because what I said in my video earlier this week when I selected the side I would pick. I just don't think England have that many good options at the moment in the front row. I think that is a bit of a concern, but Genge, George and Sinclair are their best options. Itoje starts, Ribbans, good to see him come back in, and as I say, an unchanged back row. I'm disappointed to see Alex Mitchell not given a chance to start. I think at this moment in time, from what we've seen this Six Nations, he's just playing better than Jack Van Portfleet. It's nothing against Van Portfleet. He is, 21 years old. He's a young guy. I think he's already had moments in an England shirt where you think he could be a really exciting prospect for the future. He's gained some international experience. I just wonder whether he would benefit from almost dropping to the bench, having Mitchell come in and just kind of developing his game from there. I just feel like he's been struggling maybe in the last couple of weeks, and Mitchell I think has been really, really good. So I'm disappointed in that. There'll be a lot of debate about the fly half position, because there always is. And whilst the performance against France, of course, it wasn't Marcus Smith's fault, as I have said since that game, the video I did on Sunday when I look back at events on Twickenham, the game plan wasn't right to get the best out of Marcus Smith. They weren't able to execute that more free-flowing, quicker, trying to stretch a team game plan. I think Owen Farrell is better suited to a kind of game plan that England will have to implement if they are to make this tight. I think England have to make this ugly. They have to make this an arm wrestle. Their kicking game has to be really good, and their defensive pressure and intensity and physicality has to be good, and they have to try and squeeze Ireland. Now, as I've said already, I think Ireland will still have too much for England regardless, but I think if England tried to play in the way that they did against France with Smith at 10, they would be in trouble. So I don't mind seeing Owen Farrell come back in. I also think Tuilagi has to come back in. As soon as Lawrence was the player you were losing in the centres, Tuilagi was the guy that brings you power. And I know it's a throwback. I know England fans get frustrated and bored of the over-reliance on Manu Tuilagi, but he's the only guy that brings a similar sort of power to Ollie Lawrence. And from an Irish perspective as well, if you're the Irish centres, who's the last English player you would want to see lining up against you? I think it's Manu Tuilagi, so I think that selection makes absolute sense. Henry Arundell as well. It was a matter of time, wasn't it, really, before he got his start. He gives England more pace in that back 3. How does he deal with the kicking game and Ireland kicking the ball away and the tactical side of it, which you can get found out at international level? I guess we'll wait and see. It's time for him to prove himself. And Watson and Stewart, fine at this moment in time. Stewart, I think, is excellent in the air, so he would be my 15. There are other options on the wing, but it's Anthony Watson. We know what he can do. So that's the England team. Borthwick, I think, hasn't made as many changes as I expected. I think ultimately Ireland have too much for England in this game. That's kind of what I feel. I look at the back row, I look at the pack, I think there'll be too much power. They've got too much continuity in the way they attack. They'll get over the gain line. They'll stretch England. And as we've seen in this Six Nations, you stretch England, you'll be able to score points against them. It's what Scotland did in the first game. It's what Ireland's going to do to them in the final game. I believe, obviously, being English, if I'm wrong, I'll be absolutely delighted, but I just can't see it happening. So that's where I think the game is going to be won. I think it'll be an Ireland Grand Slam, and I think England will improve because they have to, don't they? I mean, they can't be as poor as they were against France. They will have been embarrassed by what happened at Twickenham. I think there will be a response. It will be a tighter game than that was. I still think ultimately Ireland will beat them relatively comfortably. That's my gut instinct. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Let me know what you think of the team selections as well. Irish fans, are you feeling even more confident now after you've seen the fact that Dorris and Sheehan have both passed fit? England fans, what do you make of the approach Steve Borthwick has taken with this one? Did you expect more changes? And do you give them any hope of getting a result against Ireland? I'll be doing videos throughout Super Saturday. It's going to be an absolute cracker. So I'll try and cover every single game. Enjoy it wherever you're watching it. If you're going to the games, if you're at the pub, make sure you subscribe to the channel and like the video. Drop a comment down below. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.